what drew me to anthropology was I was really interested in the cultures of kind of ancient Greece and Rome and the Mediterranean. And as an undergrad, I was at University of Michigan, and I had a lot of the other kind of native students in my group there, you know, the Native Student Association, were kind of teasing me and giving me a little bit of a hard time. And I've often heard kind of a little bit of a hard time about interest in archaeology and being a grave digger and stuff. This was many years ago, right, in the late 80s. And so I just thought, well, I'm not interested in getting anywhere near the politics of NAGPRA and repatriation and archaeology in North America. But I just had an interest, a cultural interest in the Near East and in the cultures of the Middle East. So that's how I first got involved in anthropology and archaeology. It's kind of completely come full circle. The thing that I tried to stay away from and knew that I didn't want to do is the thing that I spend all my time doing now, which is working on community-based participatory research projects, working with communities, trying to understand how we can do research together and in partnership with each other. So there's quite a few projects that I've done. Some of them are partnering with local communities in Turkey around the site of Çatalhöyük, where I did my dissertation work. And then others are working with Anishinaabe, Ojibwe communities, tribes in the state of Michigan, and trying to figure out how we can just find projects that are of interest to them, and their interests are what drive the research that I do. One of the main ones that I've done for a very long time is the project in Turkey, the one I mentioned, working with communities around Çatalhöyük in Turkey. And that is really a long-term, I guess it's been about 20 years now that I've worked there, and it's trying to understand how these local village groups that are around this site, how they want to engage with the site, what they think about the site, the kind of interests they have, and then trying to find ways to follow up on the research they want to do. Not surprisingly, most of their research isn't necessarily related to the archaeology. It's related to kind of heritage questions and archaeotourism, those kinds of questions. So, for example, one of the things that I've been doing the last 6 to 8 years and the next probably 5 years until that project ends in Turkey is working with a women's group there. We really kind of started this women's group about 6 years ago, just going in and holding meetings in villages and saying, what are you interested in? What kind of things would you like to do? And one of the things that came out is they'd like to start, particularly the young women, a women's crafting co-op, because they're quite talented in terms of making all kinds of handicrafts. So they would like to kind of get into the tourism that's happening at Çatalhöyük, which has now been inscribed on the World Heritage List. And they want to do that through making handicrafts with this group of women in the village there. So I've been working with them to try to develop that. I've been working with the men in the village because one of the things they said they wanted to do was develop kind of a nonprofit, what we would call here like a 501c3, related to issues of heritage and tourism, so that they have a voice long-term about Çatalhöyük and what happens there and the development that happens there. So we just last summer filed the paperwork in Turkey for them to have this, what's called a devlet, like a nonprofit organization related to tourism and protecting Çatalhöyük. So that's the project in Turkey. The projects that I'm working on with tribal communities in Michigan, particularly the Saginaw-Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan. There's a whole range of things, ranging from an intellectual property project that is about protecting a traditional Anishinaabe rock art site and figuring out how we protect the images and the knowledge about those images while at the same time sharing those images and the teachings that go with them. And we're thinking about how we can develop co-management of that site with the state who's currently managing it. I also have a new project that I just got a grant from the Mellon New Directions Foundation. It's an awesome grant that will give me about a year off to learn my language, Anishinaabe, more fluently, and also to work on another CBPR project, which involves kind of mapping sacred sites and GIS on the landscape and trying to develop a whole new specialization that I haven't had in the archaeology of the Midwest. And that was, again, all of these are community-based initiatives, things that I didn't really know about and had to develop skills to be able to do because they all came directly from communities. So that's kind of a wide view of the range of different projects I'm working on right now. I mean, I'm probably not even the person to ask. What I would love is if we could hear from people who've worked with me to hear what they think, how these projects impact them. I mean, I have my own view, and I hope they've had an impact or been useful. But from my view, I think in Turkey, it's really changed, I think, just the fact that people are involved in the conversation. And often you hear this term kind of, well, now they have a seat at the table. And I think they've had a seat at the table previously, but having a seat at the table doesn't mean you're getting over these kind of power relations and imbalances that happen oftentimes. And that's what I'm hoping for in Turkey, is that through the work that I've done, local people there feel not just that they can have a seat at the table, but they really have something to say. They feel informed. They feel comfortable having something really meaningful to contribute to the process of managing Çatalhöyük and the long-term care of that place. So that's what I would hope for there. And I think we're starting to see that. I mean, when I first started and did interviews, I went house to house in the villages there, and I would talk to people and they would say they didn't feel like they had the right to say anything about Çatalhöyük, or they weren't the experts, they didn't know, and a lot of this, they just didn't feel comfortable. And that was really deeply troubling to me, because I felt like this is your heritage. You don't feel like you've been disenfranchised to the point that you don't feel like you have a right or a say, and you're not the expert. And I think I would view my success there, or what I hope I've accomplished, is just breaking some of that down and having people realize that even by Turkish law, but just ethically, morally, people do have a right to their own heritage, particularly what's in their own backyard. And that something like a World Heritage Site and the tourism that's going to happen there, that really does impact them, and they do have a right to speak up about it and to be involved in it, not just in kind of superficial ways, but in really deep, meaningful ways that can hopefully have positive impacts on their life more broadly. So that's a case there in Turkey. And with tribes, I mean, I think my biggest impact has been just working to build capacity to the point where tribes in Michigan and Macra, they are doing amazing work with repatriation. I'm completely out of the picture. I mean, I'm still there and I assist and I help whenever I ask to, but they don't need me in any way. They're completely doing amazing projects and work surrounding research, human remains, protecting sacred sites. And I think that's kind of what I hope to see, just that I could see some usefulness in my work. I'm very proud to say that I personally have helped with several hundred repatriations, individuals that we put into the ground. We just put an ancestor, I wasn't there for the actual ceremony, but one of the remains came from UMass, and I was here assisting with that this past week and got to see that one ancestor go home. So it's those things that I count as my success, and I feel really happy and proud about. You need to find things that sustain you and that really nourish you. I wasn't someone who, I guess I initially, the first question you asked was what drew me to anthropology, and it was a curiosity and just an intellectual interest about cultures of the Mediterranean. But what made me want to go to graduate school and continue this work was because I really wanted to change the way archaeology and anthropology is practiced. And so now I think I just see it as this larger picture, a part of a larger project of decolonization, of trying to change, really transform in deep, meaningful ways the academy, the way we create knowledge and produce knowledge and share knowledge. So when I think about that, that's what gets me really excited and motivated. And I think we say as Anishinaabe people, what I've heard and been inspired by some of this work, where people have said, be a good ancestor. Always remember to be a good ancestor. My friend and colleague, Shannon Martin, has said that several times, and whenever she says that, it always reminds me, be a good ancestor. So when I start feeling down and feeling like I'm not making enough progress, or change is glacial, completely slow, is it really having meaning? I just remember that we're supposed to be working to be a good ancestor, and hoping that change in places like institutions, it's incredibly slow. But I do see that. I look around and I'm inspired with my colleagues, and I see that we're making change. It's slow, but it's there. So I think that's what keeps me going. That, and looking at my children and saying, what choice do we have? We're working to try to make a better world for them. Well, I think anthropology is a really powerful tool. We were just talking about this morning in my public anthropology class. I teach an undergrad public anthropology class here at UMass, and the students were amazing. They really inspired me, talking about things that inspire you. And what really was exciting was hearing the ways that they're thinking about applying anthropology in their lives. One of the activities I did was the very first day of class, I asked them, number one, what is public anthropology? And number two, how do you think you'll use this in your career, your life, your studies? And I had them write things out and talked about it. And I saved those. And today was the last day of class, and I asked them the same questions. And then I gave them back their original responses, and I had them compare it. They were stunned and surprised, and I was too, by how much their impressions and ideas had changed over just these 13 weeks we spent together. And one of the real clear changes was that they had a real understanding of how anthropology and this type of work can be used in all sorts of fields. One woman's going to medical school, and she said, I don't see now how I could possibly practice medicine without having this deep understanding of anthropology. That's going to make me a good doctor. Someone else was saying she thinks about toys and comics and working in that kind of industry, and she was saying, you need anthropology for that. You need anthropology to think about how you're not bringing sexism and racism into the toys that you're creating when you're representing things that children are going to see. And another woman talked about, she's going to grad school in a different field outside of anthropology, but talked about how the skills and the way of viewing the world and this work with community-based research is going to really impact her entire career, her graduate career, and her scholarship in the future. So those were just a few of them, but it really struck me how they could see all these ways that anthropology really connects to the broader world.